Now I'm ready, Isaiah. 1 Kings. The heart of man, the pride of man astonishes me a lot of times. Like in a millennial time period, it just fries my mind according to prophecies. Here these people have 1,000 years of watching the Lord Jesus Christ be the king on the earth. No scandals, no begging, no, taxation. You would think that these people would, as a corporate body of people, would enjoy this and be appreciative. But at the end of the millennium, there's going to be an army, the sands of the seas, against the Lord. I just don't get that. Okay, now in the storyline with Ahab, of course he's going down the wrong road. He gets a big warning from God in chapter 17, 3.5 years of no rain. Then in chapter 18, he gets a wake-up call where Elijah made a fool out of all the prophets of Jezebel. You would think that would wake the guy up. Now, chapter 19, the camera goes to Elijah, so Ahab's out of the picture. Chapter 20, the first part of it, the Lord allows him to win a battle against Syria, and you would think he would have some gratitude on it. But no, this guy keeps going down a raunchy path. So we got halfway through chapter 20. So 22 is the new territory. So in the first half of this chapter, they win the battle. And the second half of the chapter, again, they win the battle. But he is going to get majorly punished because he doesn't get rid of Ben-Hadad. And then chapter 21 is a classic chapter on government confiscation. It's the first time the word govern is found in the Bible. And so it's how government confiscates people's property. And of course, this is going to do it the violent way, where there's two ways government confiscates people's property. One is through deception, and that's their favorite mode because it's less violent. And the second is violent, and in 1 Kings 21, it's going to be the violent method. And then in chapter 22 is the idea of deception when God gets involved with it in order to destroy somebody. And you would think that this guy would wake up, but he doesn't. So in chapter 20, verse 22, and he gets warned by men time and time again. Okay, and the prophet came to king of Israel. So this is not Elijah, it's a different prophet. So this is maybe one of the 7,000 that the Lord told Elijah that's still standing. Said unto him, Go strengthen thyself and mark and see what thou doest, for at the return of the year the king of Syria will come up against thee. So this guy's army lost a bunch of dead people, and this guy's going to go at it again. And this is another thing that just boggles my mind, is how can kings and political figureheads use soldiers as pawns and care nothing about it? Of course, the same thing happens in America. What veterans go through, by especially the left side of the left side, what they do to veterans just blows my mind. And I don't think anything's going to change the idea. So in 23, and the servants of the king of Syria said unto him, Their gods are gods of the hills, therefore they are stronger than we. But let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they. Of course, this is a false idea to deceive the king of Syria. And that's a way of saying to God, sick 'em. A lot of times we people tend to pray, oh God, we're deserving of this, we're deserving of this. And it's better to pray to God to tell him what they've been saying, and they're going to mocking him. That's a better approach. And then verse 24, and do this thing, so this is the false idea, take the kings away, let every man out of his place, put captains in the rooms, and number thee an army, like the army that thou hast lost. No concern about the men that's lost, the men and their wives and their children. They're just pawns. Horse for horse and chariot for chariot, we will fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they. And he hearkened unto their voice and did so. I mean, it's just amazing. And it came to pass at the return of the year, then Ben-Hadad numbered the Syrians and went up to Aphek to fight against Israel. And the children of Israel were numbered and were all present and went against them. And the children of Israel pitched before them like two little flocks of kids. But the Syrians filled the country. So it looks like, well, the Syrians should win numerically. But because they mocked God, God got involved. Verse 28, and there came a man of God and spake unto the king of Israel and said, thus saith the Lord, because the Syrians have said, the Lord is God of the hills, but he is not God of the valleys. Therefore will I deliver all this great multitude into thine hand, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. And you would think that Ahab would say, thank you, Lord, I am going to worship you now. But no. Romans 2:4 says that the goodness of God should lead us to repentance. But it doesn't in many cases. So, okay, there we got that. And they pitched one over against the other 7 days, and so it was that in the seventh day the battle was joined. And the children of Israel slew the Syrians 100,000 footmen in one day. Now the Bible just makes it a sentence. But if we stop and meditate on that, 100,000 dead carcasses. That night, here comes the coyotes and the wolves, and that day, here come the buzzards pecking at them. And then possibly here comes the wives looking for their husbands on the battlefield. And then about 3 days, their bodies swelling in the heat, and the stench is coming to a thing. 100,000! And what happened to Ben-Hadad? He probably slept pretty good that night. And it's just amazing, the mind of these people. 30, and the rest fled to Aphek. So there's more into the city. And there a wall fell upon 27,000 of the men that were left. A wall. That had to be a huge wall. You would have thought they'd have seen this wall falling and they're running out of there. I don't know if that was a wall of China. 27,000 more got crushed under a wall. That must have been huge. And how long? I mean, I kind of doubt that 27,000 guys got in one little box and wait for this wall to fall on them. And you would tend to think that's actually part of an advanced civilization that had amazing technology that is around us if we kind of take note of it. And a lot of this was in America. And so a lot of the colonists, as they're marching west, they're coming across amazing stone structures, amazing antiquity. And people just don't even look at it. They don't think about it. How did this take place? But here you got a wall that killed 27,000 people. And Ben-Hadad fled came into the city, into an inner chamber, so that's called NORAD. Okay, we lived in Colorado Springs for 2.5 years. And Colorado Springs has 5 military bases, 4 at the time when we were there. They have Fort Carson, that's Army. They have Air Force on the east side of the city. On the north side, they got the Air Force Academy. The people in the area called them the Cadidiots. Instead of the Air Force cadets, they called them the Cadidiots. And then there's NORAD, and that's the secret underground in the mountain of behind Breckenridge. On the south part, there's a shrine for Will Rogers, but it's inside the mountain, and it can withstand nuclear war. And at 9/11, that's where they wanted to send Bush and Cheney into Camp NORAD. So it's a hidden place, okay, to protect the elite. And that's kind of where Ben-Hadad was going. You know, if this guy is so brave causing this battle, why don't he just be out there? So, and then 31, and a servant said unto him, Behold now, we have heard that the kings of the house of Israel are merciful kings. So this is one thing that was interesting I came across recently, that when after World War II, some Japanese women and then men came into the U.S. and they had heard all these bad stories from their Japanese inferior people. Americans are animals and they'll do this. And these Japanese women who were taken prisoners and the men, they thought that they were going to be, you know, brutally murdered and taken advantage of. But when the Americans set them down and gave them a nice meal, it just fried their brains. It's like, we weren't told this. They couldn't believe the kindness that they experienced from the Americans. Okay, and so that's like the idea of the same thing here, is that the house of Israel are merciful kings. So they're thinking, okay, we can go there and not be afraid if we're prisoners of war. He says, Let us, I pray thee, put sackcloth on our loins and ropes upon our heads, and go out to the king of Israel, and peradventure he will save thy life. So obviously they're trying to feign that they're sorry. So they girded sackcloth on their loins and put ropes on their heads, and came to the king of Israel and said, Thy servant Ben-Hadad saith, I pray thee, let me alive. And he said, Is he yet alive? He is my brother. What kind of a dude says that? I mean, that's one of the reasons that Saul lost his kingdom. In 1 Samuel 15, where God said to Saul, Go in there and kill those Amalekites and kill every one of them. And then he saved Agag, and he saved the sheep and the animals. And when that took place, then Samuel shows up, and then he said, God said, kill everybody. And you left Agag here, and so then Samuel just obliterated a guy right on the spot, death sentence. This dude, this Ben-Hadad, caused the death of 127,000 of his own people in the second battle, let alone the first battle, let alone the Israelites. This dude needs executed slowly, piece by piece. You know, that's what should happen to him. But Ahab, an arrogant cuss, and these elitists kind of stick together. So let him live. He's my brother. Are you kidding me? And if I were the people in Israel, I would have said, you know, you should be executing this guy. So 33, now the men did diligently observe whether anything would come from him, and did hastily catch it. And they said, Thy brother Ben-Hadad. And he said, Go ye, bring him. Then Ben-Hadad came forth to him, and he caused him to come up into the chariot. This guy exalted him. And Ben-Hadad said unto him, The cities which my father took from thy father, I will restore. Oh, thank you so much. You're so kind. And thou shalt make streets for thee in Damascus as my father made in Samaria. They said, then said Ahab, I will send thee away with this covenant. So he made a covenant with him and sent him away. Should have executed a guy. Now the next story I think is such a funny story. But he's going to use this to pronounce judgment on Ahab. Because, as you know, I've been saying, this is what Ahab should have done, and that's what this guy is going to say too. Meaning the Lord's going to back this up. Yeah, Ben-Hadad should have been executed. So then 35, a certain man of the sons of the prophets, so they had a schooling run by the prophets. Elijah was a part of this. Elisha was a part of this. So it's like, like an unaccredited schooling or whatnot. And so it's just one of the fellows in the school of the prophets, the sons of the prophets. And he said unto his neighbor in the word of the Lord. So he is speaking, thus saith the Lord. And what is he saying? The Lord says, smite me, I pray thee. I'm glad I don't have that calling. Of course, this is a good, if somebody don't believe that there's right divisions in the Bible, tell them, why don't you practice that one? So he says to this guy, smite me, I pray thee, and the man refused to smite him. And, kind of a logical thing. Okay, who would go to smack the guy? And, but he did say in the word of the Lord, so maybe the guy said, well, since the Lord said to do it, then I'm going to cock you. Well, okay. Then said he unto him, because thou hast not obeyed the voice of the Lord, behold, as soon as thou art departed from me, a lion shall slay thee. Okay, fella, I want you to smack me. No, I'm not going to hit you. Okay, then you leave, a lion's going to kill you. So that kind of got the news out. So the next guy says, man, if he asks me that, I am going to put it to him. And what a strange story. And as soon as he was departed from him, a lion found him and slew him. Then he found another man and said, smite me, I pray thee. And a man smote him so that in spite he wounded him. He said, not me. I am not going to become lion meat. And so he's got a major injury on his face, on his body or whatnot. So now he's going to use that as an illustration. And so the prophet departed, waited for the king by the way, and disguised himself with ashes upon his face. Maybe it was Ash Wednesday. And the king passed by, and he cried unto the king and said, thy servant went out into the midst of the battle. So he's actually lying, he's being deceiving, but that's the art of war. The art of war is deception. And that's what he's in the middle of. So the servant went out into the midst, thy servant went out into the midst of the battle. Behold, a man turned aside and brought a man unto me and said, keep this man, and if by any means he be missing, then shall thy life be for his life, or else thou shalt pay a talent of silver. And as thy servant was busy here and there, he was gone. And the king of Israel said unto him, so shall thy judgment be, thyself hast decided it. And he hasted and took the ashes away from his face, and the king of Israel discerned him that he was of the prophets. And he said unto him, thus saith the Lord, because thou hast let go out of thy hand a man whom I appointed to utter destruction, therefore thy life shall go for his life, and thy people for his people. And the king of Israel went to his house heavy and displeased, and came to Samaria. So he was pronounced a death sentence right on the spot. Now, in the Oriental cultures, when Paul and Silas was in prison, and they had the earthquake, and the Philippian jailer knew that he was going to be executed for the escapees. So he's like, I'm going to take care of this myself. And then Paul and Silas said, we're here. Now, that's a pretty good practice. And if our country started practicing stuff like this, if a judge, for example, there was a judge in California that this young gal was raped. And then the guy cut her arms off. So he left her for dead. She survived this. I think he threw her under a bridge. She survived this. And the guy was charged with the crime, went to jail, did his time, and was released from jail. And that poor lady lives in fear. What should happen is the judge who allowed that crime should be executed for what he's allowed to happen. And the reason why these people, like in Portland and Chicago and in Memphis, is they have no cash bail. And Ecclesiastes 8 verse 11 says that when a sentence against an evil is not speedily executed, therefore in the hearts of the sons of men, they are fully set to do evil. If they're not getting punished for their crimes, they're going to go out and do it some more. It is going to be, they're believing they're going to get away with it, and they are getting away with it. And when these judges allow, say, a murderer to be on parole, and if he kills again, that judge should be executed. That'll put a stop, or at least decrease a lot of this stuff. And in the Israeli day, they did this. In American days, in the early days, yeah. Who was just telling? Oh, you were just telling me about that one guy. I won't say it publicly. But yeah, there was an elderly lady in Australia that her granddaughters were raped, and the Aussie government, I don't know if they did much of anything. She's an elderly lady, was in her 80s, so she got a shotgun. Went to the perpetrator's house and shot him right where he committed his crime. And the Aussie people supported her for it. What are you going to do, put an 80-year-old in prison? So what? And in the old days, that's called vigilantism, but it's really not. If we analyze it, we can establish our own jury. And we have done that when I was doing the law stuff in the past. And, the idea of, people thinking it's all through the court, the people have delegated that to the court, but that doesn't mean we've given up that right. And as a community, we can establish the laws of pornographic material. And if we did that, because the Supreme Court has allowed that to the people, so if a community assembles a jury, and they will say that this material, this video, this, but who wants to look at that stuff? And we could say this is pornography. We could get rid of that adult bookstore in that method. But then who's going to assemble a jury, and who wants to look at that garbage? Fill your mind with that trash in order to declare it. The Supreme Court has said that the community can do this. But who wants to take the time? I don't want to take the time to look at that garbage. And so in this storyline, Ahab amazingly is not going to get right. And so then chapter 21, we'll go ahead. This is how, if you hold your finger here, go to Leviticus 6, if you would. In Leviticus 6, it gives, now in our culture, okay, up in Canada, a person has a paycheck and they take out more than 50% of the paycheck. Okay? That's why these professional athletes don't want to go to Canada, because they lose so much. So theirs is right out in the open, 50 to 60%, and then the Canadian states on the western side are trying to secede to become part of the U.S. Not that they'd be 51, they'd be 51, 52, and 53. because it's on the west is where they make the agriculture and they provide the funds for Canada, and the ones on the east who are scarfing it up aren't repaying these people, and now they're trying to run a pipeline through without the approval of the East Canada. Okay, but theirs is right up front. Now ours is the same way, only they do it in a different way, where they had the federal, the state, the county, gas, sin tax, property tax. So we're up in the same range, it's just a different route and don't look as dark. But here's how they do it. Leviticus 6 verse 1, it says, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, if a soul sin, commit a trespass against the Lord, and lie unto his neighbor in that which he hath delivered to him to keep, or in fellowship, or in a thing taken away by violence, or hath deceived his neighbor. Now the last two is how governing structures do it. Deception and violence. That's their choice is deception. If that works, that's better. But when that doesn't work, violence takes place. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in New York with this commie that's trying to run for office. You know what would really be funny? If that guy does get in, and then when his time is out, Trump is no longer president, Trump becomes mayor of New York City. That'd be a funny thing, because he is going to destroy that city. And the same dude up here in Chicago, he's destroying that city. Okay, because when they think they can just take money from people, that's no different than a guy on a Saturday night going from a convenience store with a gun. He's a piker compared to those guys. You know, this is what we have to endure in our life. That's fine. I'd rather be the victim and not the perpetrator. Okay, but the idea is deception is first, where people think they are required to pay this, but yet when you don't, then violence steps in. And so that's the trick. Now in the Oriental culture, they don't mess around. They just skip the deception, go right to the violence. If you don't like it, we're just taking you out. And that's what they do in China. Okay, and so in our culture, deception will be one. That's the majority of the way. And people don't think they have an option, which they really don't. There's a ways of trying to, regulate the law, but yet the second is violence. And so in Leviticus 6, now here's what I think is the amazing thing about that Leviticus 6. When Zacchaeus saw the Lord, and the Lord said, "Come to my house," Zacchaeus revealed his salvation by being willing to pay restitution to anybody that he took from in the tax structure. So that really points out something about Zacchaeus. Because they had a certain level where they were supposed to pay taxes, but then they're allowed a certain above for their own lives, and a lot of them jumped it to wherever they wanted it. And so Zacchaeus said, "I'm willing to pay so much." He said fourfold, because that showed that guy was really trying to do the right thing. Now, in Nehemiah's day, Nehemiah 5, so you talk about the national debt in America, and of course, it can be solved pretty quickly because it's a facade. In many ways, it's a facade. But if a guy does say that, then, a bullet comes his way. Because the love of money is the root of all evil. And so the idea in America, that facade is propped up by, amazingly, our birth certificates, which is a negotiable instrument. Now, I don't know how all that works. Some people think that they can monetize it, and I don't know. But the deception in our country is just amazing. But I'm looking forward to the day when the Lord shows how it's supposed to be done. That's going to be a fascinating time. Amazing time. So in 1 Kings 21, what it does is it shows how governing structures confiscate people's property. And so he says, and it came to pass after these things that Naboth, the Jezreelite, had a vineyard, which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Man, you don't want to live by these people. You want to move away from these people. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs. Well, you knucklehead, it's a vineyard. Why would you pull the trees out and put herbs in there? Unless you're putting a poppy seed and maybe hemp and maybe a different kind of herb. I remember as a kid, every once in a while we'd see a marijuana plant in the field. When you're cultivating, you just yank it out. And I remember usually there's a bust of marijuana down in DeMott area because it grows in that wild sand real quick. And you'd see it advertised in Chicago in the news, bust down in DeMott. And that was advertisement to every smoker. That's where you go to get it. And they did that so much it was just pitiful. But he says, I may have it for a garden of herbs because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee a better vineyard than it. So, what is he going to do if he doesn't do it? He's going to condemn it under eminent domain. You say, well, that's lawful. It is not lawful. They're going to condemn it. I watched my dad do this. Because the first time we had power lines come through our property was the Huff farm. And so Dad learned some things. And then the next time NIPSCO wants to come through our land. And I was there when the guy showed up, and he's talking to Dad, and he's trying to be all like, boy, what a beautiful house, and oh, Mrs. Hoffman this, and Mrs. Hoffman that. And I'm a high school kid, I'm watching my dad just being cool about this. And Dad knew what you do is you gotta push him as far as you can and before condemnation. Because you get a condemnation, you're gone. So you get the best you can, you push as long as you can, and then you agree to the deal. And so this guy, he's trying to schmooze us and everything. And all of a sudden, then he started to get kind of testy because Dad was asking questions. And Dad said to him, he said, I would like your job. Guy said, why? He said, going from place to place, kind of schmooze people over. And the guy's getting mad. And Dad said, when you have a discussion, the first one getting mad loses. He said, you just lost. And the guy leaves. And then they had to come back, and so you make them come back time and time again because they're going to come through and they're going to condemn your property. Take it to court, eminent domain. Then they're going to tell the jury, now this guy, we just offered them a good price, and he was so unreasonable. And of course, if we have to raise it higher, then your utility bill is going to go up. Well, how's the jury going to vote? Your goose is cooked. That's how government does it. So he said, I will give thee for a better vineyard than it, or it will seem good to thee. I will give thee the worth of its money. Now, when you go down 65, right around Lebanon, there's a huge grain bin there, and you could see it's a pretty big farm. And I noticed the last time I drove down, there was no equipment around there, and that whole place was abandoned. And I thought, what happened? I wonder if Daddy died. Well, I found out because Jerry Robertson at the other church is a seed corn salesman. And we were talking about that. He said, man, that guy got big bucks. Industrial people came in, told him they wanted to buy his property, and I have no idea what figure. I thought it was like 80 grand per acre. I think that's a lowball figure. And they jumped on it. And he took the money, and I guess he's got a farm that will make anybody jealous. Huge buildings and stuff. So he again knew that if he did not eventually give in, they're going to condemn his property. And I guess that figure was just, I guess that you'd have a Brinks truck to carry all that stuff in. And that's north of Indian. I thought, okay, well, Daddy didn't die. So that turned out good for the farmer. And so that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to give him a different piece of property. Years ago in Chicago, Pacific Garden Mission had a certain location. And the big shots in Chicago wanted that location. And so Pacific Garden Mission made them pay a healthy price. And then they took the money and are where they're at now, and they've got a pretty nice system where they're at now. But they're away from the elites in Chicago who wanted that property. And so that's where you got to use some wisdom dealing with these people. In Ahab's case, Naboth is not going to give in. And the rest of the story. So verse 3, Naboth said to Ahab, the Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. Now that's a Jewish thing. So he is complying with his Jewish religion. So he has a conviction of his Jewish faith. And that's why he wasn't being stubborn. He was trying to be true to his faith. And Ahab, he knew. Ahab knew this, and he didn't care. And Ahab came into his house heavy, displeased, because the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. Pouting. He's pouting. And he says, for what he said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed. And turned away his face and would eat no bread. The guy's throwing a 2-year-old tender tantrum. And here comes Hillary in there, and she's going to let him get his way. And what a thing. And these people sleep good at night. Absolute psychopaths. And that's often what happens in political figureheads. They become absolute psychopaths, narcissists, and it doesn't seem to bother these people a bit. But we got a God in heaven that's keeping track. And he's going to keep track. Well, we'll come back to this next week. Verse 5, Hillary comes in.